This episode is brought to you by the Marine Corps Association and Foundation. Do you like to run? Do you like to walk? Do you like to bike? Like to go for a swim? You sound like a Marine. And you're in luck. You can do all those things by participating in the Marine Corps Birthday Run. Join us in celebrating the Marine Corps' 249th birthday with the Run for Marines virtual 10K on November 10th, 2024. Whether you run, walk, bike, or swim, it's your chance to honor our Marines and the birth of our Corps. The first 100 participants get an exclusive racing pin. Sign up today at mca-event/event/the-run-for-marines-10k-4.
Hey, Scuttlebutt listeners, this is episode 168. This week, we welcome the founder of PreVeteran, retired Air Force LtCol Jason C. Anderson, to the show. PreVeteran is a veteran transition organization that trains and assists veterans in moving from military service to life in the private sector. Jason knows these challenges all too well, even though his resume would lead one to believe he made a smooth and successful transition. Jason was struck with a sobering reality. He was not equipped business-wise to flourish in his new roles. Unfortunately, he learned firsthand that the military transition model is not optimized for preparing service members for private sector success. Jason explains these challenges, the tools veterans need to understand the private sector, and how PreVeteran optimizes veterans so that their talents and experience can benefit their future organizations and themselves. Here is episode 168.
Hello, Scuttlebutt listeners. My name is William, and as you know, the Marine Corps Association, we're really trying to push for a lot of help and aid for new veterans, people getting out of the military. And I can find really no better person to speak with than our dear friend who we met at Modern Day Marine, Jason Anderson, who is the founder and CEO of the organization called PreVeteran, and he's also a retired lieutenant colonel from the Air Force. So, Jason, how are you today?
I am doing fantastic. Lovely Tuesday. How about you, William?
We're doing all right. So let's start off just talking about a little bit who you are, your background, how you became involved with the Air Force, and then sort of how did you get started with PreVeteran?
Yeah, great question. So I was in the Air Force for a total of 24 years. I'm an Air Force Academy graduate. I retired in 2014. Just prior to my retirement, I spent my last 6 years at the Pentagon. So I became very familiar with the defense contracting space or aerospace defense kind of industry. Spending a total of 6 years there, I was the managing director, or not the managing director, I was the country director, rather, for Japan, for Secretary of the Air Force International Affairs. So what that meant is I sold a bunch of equipment and training to Japan in that role. So naturally, that kind of led me to speak with and talk to large defense contractors who wanted to sell goods into Japan. So the story with that is, after 6 years in the Pentagon doing that, I thought I understood aerospace defense. So that's kind of a bit of a teaser there, but it ended up retiring in 2014, moved back to Wyoming, which was my hometown, home state, and Jackson Hole was my hometown. And then after talking to a bunch of friends and networking, I ended up getting a entry-level business development job with Rockwell Collins, which was a smaller defense contractor. In fact, there are folks that used to come in and talk to me all the time that were at the Pentagon there. So I really liked the company. And after doing that within a year, I was promoted to the head of business for Japan, Korea, Taiwan for the company. So it was a very quick rise within the ranks, if you will. And then in total, I spent 9 years with Rockwell Collins, that then turned into Collins Aerospace, that then turned into Raytheon Technologies. So all that is to say, people looking outward in at me were like, wow, Jason, you were very successful. And to some extent I was, obviously, but, and this is the big part of the story here, I was not ready for any of those roles in the private sector. Even though I was at entry level and then moved up to executive, I was woefully prepared to perform and do well in the private sector. And that's how PreVeteran was born.
Okay, so what do you mean you were woefully ill prepared? Like how so?
Good question. So, like I would say this. So even though I went in and I thought I understood what business development was, I did not. And then as I went up in to be an executive, where you kind of have to have purview over strategy, business development, program management, product line, and then know all the different business units. I lacked a basic business acumen, I would call it. So flash forward a bit from there, and it took quite a while from 2016 to 2019 to do a bunch of research on transition. I kind of found out that the transition environment is challenged. That's nothing new. There's a lot of articles written on that lately, from the GAO to RAND to the VA. So it's no surprise that transition is super challenging, but I think we've actually figured out what the problems are. And the problems I had with understanding the private sector are the problems what everyone has. And we've kind of diagnosed the space down to having the root cause, the problem with the military transition environment is no one has told the service member that the military and the private sector are vastly different environments. And something that simple is very profound. But in the current transition system, we'll call it the TAP, or Transition Assistance Program led environment. That goes back 30 years now, because it was created in 91. The system as it is today, and even going back that far, basically implies to the service member that the systems are similar. The reason why I say that is because they tell you to translate your skills, network, build a resume, and interview well, and you'll be good to go. Moreover, they'll also tell you, hey, you're going to have a $120,000 contract waiting for you the second you get out. People are going to be clamoring to hire you. And of course, if you ask your friends or you've been through it yourself, you'll know that that is just simply false. So the problem with the existing system is they implied for the past 30 years they're similar, which they are not. And as a result, since you have not been told they're vastly different, what service members tend to do is delay. Because if you don't know you need to change, then there's very low motivation to change, right? And no one's really telling you to change. In fact, the space right now kind of says, hey, you've got great skills, you've got great soft skills, you got grit, you got resilience, you'll fit in great. And if that were true, we wouldn't be having this conversation, and I wouldn't need to create a company. So
Yeah. So what are some of those critical differences that you've picked up on?
So the systems are vastly different, and we teach about it 3 different reasons, right? There's more than that, but the 3 principal reasons are existence, competition, and the need to make revenue. So I'll cover a little bit about each one of those. So existence. The military is mandated by the Constitution, right? It's actually law, right? It has to be there, and it's going to be there so long as we need a defense. And so long as we need a defense, we will be funded into perpetuity. So on the other end of that is the private sector, which has no mandate to exist at all. They have to create a product or service that is so needed in the market, people voluntarily pay for it. So those already were at divergent poles right there. The next is competition. So for any service, and I know we're talking to a lot of Marine Corps folks, there is no Marine B or C team that's going to unseat the A team. So there's no inherent friction of competition internally within the Marine Corps. So that's that. On the private sector, it is deliberately built, that environment, to be hyper competitive, which means it's always uncomfortable with competitors in there. And it's designed that way through antitrust laws and things like that don't let people collude and create a product that makes it an unfavorable market condition for the consumer. And then finally, the need to make revenue. So the military is essentially what we call in the private sector a cost center. It just spends money. That's not hard to just spend money. And in fact, you're encouraged to spend it all, even if you don't need to spend it all. And then on the private sector, you actually have to make it before you spend it. So what we teach about here is the thinking and decision making that you exhibit in the military and is intentionally trained for you to be optimized in the military environment is very different than the thinking and decision making required to flourish in the private sector.
Okay. So then how did you start on the road to PreVeteran? You get in this position, you realize you're not entirely prepared for it. How did you then make the jump towards, I'm going to go ahead and try to help other veterans deal with this?
Yes. So what I learned early on in my 9 years of industry was I was not prepared, but I didn't want to start teaching right away. I wanted to learn. So I took the next 6 years to kind of learn what industry was, how it's organized, how it functions, how it makes money, how different roles within industry aid the profit-making enterprise. And essentially, I created context for myself. So I essentially developed my own training, which now we train people to do. So the truth is, service members are phenomenal potential employees for companies. If the reason why I say potential is because they're missing they have significant gaps because I just explained the systems are so vastly different. But once they actually get that contextual training, they flourish phenomenally well. They just need the context for where to take their skills that they've gained in the military and apply it to a private sector environment where the private sector wants it brought in. You know what I mean?
Well, so what are some of those skills that they do bring over?
So some of the skills they do bring over is obviously get the job done, the grit, the resilience, and stuff like that. So that is true, but no one ever talks about the other side of the story where they're lacking significant understanding the private sector, how it's organized, how it functions, how it makes money. Because the environment is so different, if they don't get training to understand how that private sector organization functions, a lot of time what they'll do is they'll take their current thinking and decision making that's optimized for the military, try to pull it over one for one into the private sector, and it doesn't go that great. I'll give you an example right now. So service members, almost by definition, even if you have a primary and secondary MOS, AFSC, or whatever you do for a job, you are at the end of the day a generalist, right? So what you do is you end up doing what the unit needs. And that has a neurological consequence. What I mean by that is, even though you have a primary and secondary career, you do everything the unit needs over and over and over and over and over again. And throughout the years, it becomes a heuristic, which means it becomes an established neural pathway that is so well traveled, it levies a judgment or determines a decision for you instantly without you even thinking about it. So unless you're trained, what's happening for military members is they go into the private sector and they try to think like a generalist. And this creates two big challenges. One is they don't understand that medium to large size companies have very specific roles that require very credentialed people with experience in those specific roles for that business or to be able to engage in that particular role. So service members have a hard time figuring out exactly what role they want to go into in an organization because they feel like they can do everything. You know what I mean? And then the private sector, so you'll see it on LinkedIn on a daily basis. You'll see a service member that goes, I want somebody to give me an opportunity. And then, the private sector is like, well, what do you want to do? And the service member's like, just give me an opportunity. The private sector is like, what do you want to do? So there's this disconnect. And honestly, from our standpoint, the service member bears the responsibility for understanding the private sector, not the other way around. And the reason I say that is because the private sector constitutes 93% of the population, where the veteran is only 7%. So it makes sense that the service member should acclimate to the private sector environment and not vice versa. So I'll finish that story real quick. So another piece of that is, as a generalist, let's say you go into a marketing role within a medium, large size company. A lot of times service members don't know it, but that generalist mindset will have them creep a bit from their specific role into other roles like program management, product line, because they want to help the business, quote unquote. And what they don't know is that's not super welcome in the private sector, where people are hyper credentialed in their area. And unless there's cross collaboration activities designed to bring about collaboration, the service member should be doing their job, their specific job, and only their job, while other people are doing the same thing in their specific roles. And that's how private sector businesses go address their market.
Okay. So specifically speaking, though, how did you actually start the organization PreVeteran? And so you studied for 6 years, understanding business practices and learning how to teach. How did you then translate that into starting a company?
Yeah. So originally, I was trying to figure out all these different things I had learned over a 6-year period and did not know leaving the military. I was like, how do I best transfer that information? And I think a lot of people arrive at the, hey, I'll tell people stories, right? And that's kind of a 101 or a small group thing. Or maybe I should write a book. And then, I've written a book before, and you just find out that a book is people have to read it, they have to find it, and then it's just a snapshot of one event, and there's no real interaction. So after kind of getting some counsel and talking to other people, I decided to design a course. And this was kind of new back then because if you go back even 6 or 7 years, the cost prohibition for creating a course was quite high. It was very expensive to build a course. And honestly, just prior to COVID, the costs start coming down significantly. So the barrier to entry is essentially gone now. So I designed a course, ran a beta from 2020 to 2021. And then once we understood that our initial service or our initial product, which is training, was received very well and helped out, we then refined it and then continued on with the sole intention. The initial course was called the Employment Prep Course, and it fills those gaps that we talk about initially, where you're talking about the communication gap, thinking decision-making gap, and alignment to the private sector gap that service members have leaving the military.
Okay. So then how was your, I guess, after you did your beta testing and moved on to there, let's just say you're an average service member getting out, how would they use you? What is the process of that you provide to them, your product, so to speak?
Yep. So we call that particular line of business our individual training line. So our system is very different from what's out there right now with TAP. So what we do is we get folks at 18 months to 3 years, ideally, before they leave the military. We know that that's a bit of I guess, it's outside what is currently being done. Let's say that. And what we encourage them to do is bifurcate their life. And what I mean by that is have 2 parallel tracks where they go through initial training with us, and then they continue on with their military career up until the last day, but then they carve out an additional line item of doing what we call post-military professional development. So maybe for listeners out there that have kids that have gone to college, it's kind of analogous to what my daughter just did, which for the past 2 years, she has kind of created her post-higher education life and has an email address that's kind of associated with, graduating in 2024. All of her activity was done to get ready for college. It's very similar to a military person where we advocate, again, bifurcating your life, do a post-military professional training line item, where you go into our course initially, which is a 5-week course. That 5-week course is really nice because it's only 60 to 90 minutes of work per week because we're just filling gaps. But then once you finish that, you go into our PreVeteran alumni community where you do a bunch of additional training because transition is actually rather complex multi-line item process. We cover all that in our PreVeteran alumni community. And that's where you get to explore different careers while you're still in. And then you get to, potentially rule out ones, go to other ones. And now we're having service agreements with employers where the employer expects that we've filtered you. Essentially, they know we're giving them a valuable veteran, and we're going to send them over to direct to their talent acquisition pipelines where they bypass the applicant tracking system. And it's just a win-win-win for everybody. Service member wins because they've gotten the training to determine the differences between the military and the private sector. They've also been able to explore career pathways and down select to the one they want to go into. And then the company wins because they get a highly trained pre-veteran that's ready to go on day one.
Interesting. So you said, it starts off as, you said, was it a 5-week course?
It is a 5-week course, yes. Yep.
And then after that's the initial one, and then you branch off into various different ones. So I guess break it down, in the first section, what if someone signs on to PreVeteran, what are they getting in that first 5 weeks?
Yep. So the 5-week course is we do it 3 times a year. It's spring, summer, fall. You can check out our website to see when they're actually held, the dates. We're going to be releasing our dates for 2025 soon. Our last virtual cohort for this year, 2024, starts in less than 2 weeks. But once they go into the program, that 5-week program is delivered via learning management system and live training. It's kind of a hybrid environment. But this is where you learn the differences between the military and the private sector, those gaps we talked about, and then we fill them, right? We fill them with training and, more importantly, exercises so you can begin making that incremental mindset transition from the military to the private sector. So the 5-week training is really good. Now that we've done it for 4 years, it has great efficacy with lots of testimonials and case studies. But then after that, right, it's not just a one training and done. It's entry into our military transition 2.0 system, which covers all those different line items we talk about: career exploration, VA claim, insurance, health and wellness, all those different things that they need to do to be really successful.
Interesting. So, how many years have you been doing this for?
So we've been doing this 4 years. I will tell you that the pre-veteran alumni community is only about 18 months old. So for community's sake, it's still pretty young. But we've had tremendous success with folks finding, which careers they want to go into and staying in those careers now and excelling in those careers, and giving us testimonials that they're still using, even having been in industry a year to 2 years now, the lessons that they've learned to actually excel and be promoted faster within the company that they've been employed with.
And is your clientele so far been primarily officers or enlisted?
Good question. We've actually been enlisted heavy. I know that might be a surprise. I'll tell you what our huge discriminator is, though. We are almost exclusively folks married with kids. So the reason why I would say it's near 100%, right, with that. And it's because married with kids, folks can't get it wrong. And they know that, right? So they are very motivated to find other means to prepare themselves for success. And they see us as a viable pathway, particularly as we get to be more successful as things move on.
So let's kind of lead into the next part. So are they primarily college graduates or not? Or is there planning for future going to college, or is it primarily planning to go straight into employment?
So what's interesting about our program is I would call it specified general training. I know that sounds kind of weird, but what we do is what we really specialize in is helping service members regain their autonomy and their agency as they head to the private sector. So our training is really a model that they iterate over and over and over and over and over again, learning about the private sector, pulling new information into their thinking process, and then incrementally becoming more confident and competent in the private sector. So what they actually determine is we don't give them an ordained pathway. They create their own pathway with our tools. So if they know they need additional education, we actually can push them in that direction, but they make that decision because they've done the due diligence to figure out what they want to do after they leave the military while they're still in the military.
And so what percentage of you say of veterans who sort of get lost in this system? Is this a pretty prolific issue?
In the existing system, the current system, yes, I would say it's near. I mean, you're going to find some outliers who somehow find their way, or partially successful people like me. And the reason why is if you look, there's an absence of a model outside of pre-veteran, getting you early, getting you new tools, making you autonomous. That means by definition, everyone is doing something on an ad hoc basis individually, which, the percentage of that being successful is going to be very low because everyone's kind of guessing. You know what I mean? So that's where if you have a proven model that works and you have people go into it and use it over and over and over again and it's successful, that's what works and that's what we do. But in the absence of that, they're going to develop, or try to develop rather, their own strategies and their own pathway, having never done it before. So that leads to, let's say, less successful outcomes, probability-wise.
Interesting. So where can people find you? I'm assuming your courses are online, correct?
That's correct. Virtual, but we're also, like last week, we started our first on-site training. So our training is delivered either virtually in a 5-week format or on-site in a 8-hour format. We just did our first on-site last week. So you would go to PreVeteran.com. You could sign up under individual training. I do want to say that because we're trying to grow within the Marine Corps, in this next cohort, we are happy to offer 15 scholarships to Marine Corps folks to get into the program. It'll be free of charge to them. All they would have to do is go to the PreVeteran Foundation and look under individual, and that's where you can apply for a scholarship there. It's $1,000 value. We would love to have more Marines in the program, and we're happy to, rather the PreVeteran Foundation is happy, our sister organization, to scholarship them in 15 of those folks. So that'd be great.
All right. So aside from obviously, joining PreVeteran and signing up, what advice do you have to just our service members who are transitioning out of the military in general?
In general, don't try to do an ad hoc approach. We all know that kind of a military thought process is, fake it till you make it, or I'll figure it out. I've done hard things before. This one's hard. I'll figure it out again. Our cognitive models basically stipulate you have no long-term memory to draw from the private sector. So you end up making stuff up in your head as what to do. And that could be very far away from reality of what actually needs to be done. So what we encourage you to do is join PreVeteran, because we have an established model. We've given you a time framework, and we've given you an environment that has a community, mentorship, and all those things that we know works can help you and make you successful. So find the model. If you can find another model, great. But I think we're the only model that kind of does this, where you do what you want, but we support that from a framework and tool and community structure to go find what you want to do. And we give you a bunch of different mechanisms like office hours, mentorship, and stuff like that, where you can zoom in, ask questions, tell us what you're doing, and we can kind of help push you along in that journey all the time. Need a model, you need time, you need a community.
Well, excellent. Thank you for that. Looking forward towards the future, what do you have any plans to add additional resources to PreVeteran? Is there anything that you'd like to tease as upcoming, or?
Sure. So, like I said, we're starting to grow the on-site presence. So if there's like commanders, or if there's leadership folks, either enlisted or officer at Marine Corps bases, again, we are doing training. We know a lot of units will stand down for resiliency training or professional development training. That's something we could sweep in and do. We're doing that increasingly. I also want to share with the group that we have employers now that understand that there is a gap for very capable military people that are capable in the military sector, not yet the private sector, where we're beginning to sell corporate training to organizations to do pre-skill bridge training, pre-onboard training. So we take what we know works and quickly do that so that their uptake to the organization is much more quick and efficient. So there's a lot of really interesting things.
Let's pause. That's an interesting aspect of this, because you say it's not the corporation's responsibility; it's the veterans. But so what initiatives have you actually done with corporations so that they can be hello? Oh, there you are. I thought I lost you for a second. We're good. Anyways, yeah. So just what initiatives have corporations done to help bridge this gap a little bit more?
So if you kind of go back to my earlier comments, the way the system is currently set up is it says that the military and private sector environments are substantially similar. So it's a surprise to companies when military members have not done the proper preparation or unaware of the private sector environment and don't perform that well or job hop, right? So they're also unaware of the huge differences between the military and private sector, because no one is coming out and saying that. It's not in research articles. It's really only PreVeteran saying that. So companies are now starting to understand our messaging is getting through, that military members, again, very smart, very capable in the military domain, need training in order to be successful in the private sector domain, right? That way, again, ideally, we want to get to the service member individually years out so they can make choices. But since the market is not there and we're still pretty transactional at this point, we can have impact by putting our training in organizations right before they go into them that helps the service member understand the private sector environment so that onboarding experience is much more contextual and much more productive, where otherwise they're going to be in there and they feel like they're in a washing machine and don't quite understand the information that's coming their way. We are kind of their primer prior to skill bridge or prior to onboarding. So it's a really cool time to be in this space, and we're looking forward to having huge change on this environment.
All right, well, excellent. Thank you very much. So where can people find you? Where's your website? Do you have social media? Please throw in your shameless plugs.
Okay. So, hey, PreVeteran, we'd love to have you again because we're trying to grow our Marine Corps presence. We're happy to scholarship 15 folks who are listening to this or friends of people that are listening to this. Go to PreVeteran.com. That is where the programs are, and you'll see the individual training program. But if you want a scholarship, it would be under the PreVeteran Foundation, the nonprofit side of PreVeteran, and you would navigate to individual, and then there's apply for scholarship. Or I will leave my email address, which is jason@preveteran.com, where you can reach out to me and ask those questions, and I'll be happy to point you in the right direction for the scholarship. And then I also have a large LinkedIn presence under just Jason C. Anderson, or you can look up PreVeteran on LinkedIn. That's where most of our social media efforts take place.
All right, Jason, thank you very much. As we always like to do, we throw a curveball at the end of our interview. What was the best day in the Air Force for you?
Ooh, best day in the Air Force. That's a good one. I would have to say, so it was at my probably 6-year point. At that point, I had my first flying assignment. I was a pilot, so my first flying assignment was at Ramstein Air Base. Within the first 5 years of flying, I had been in 3 wars. So I'd been in Bosnia, Afghanistan, and Iraq. We were stationed in Pakistan at some undisclosed location. It's 4 a.m. in the morning. One of my buddies is yelling into the phone. His name was Scott. And he was going, "I don't want to do that. I don't want to do that." And he hung up the phone. Of course, it's 4 in the morning. I'm really tired after flying. I go, what was that all about? And he goes, "Hey, the boss wants me to take this exchange job in Japan." And I was like, "I'll take that job." So I ended up working my way into becoming an exchange pilot to the Japanese Air Force for the next 7 years after that. So
not a bad gig. Well, Jason, once again, thanks for coming on. And to our audience, please go check out his website, and all the information. We'll have those links available in the description of the episode. And to all y'all out there, thanks for checking us out. And for all those soon-to-be veterans, go check out PreVeteran. All right, bye.
Calling all Marine Corps spouses. Looking for real talk on Marine Corps life? Tune in to Behind the Camouflage, the podcast that connects, inspires, and empowers our Marine Corps family. From career advice to personal stories, we've got you covered. Find us wherever you listen to podcasts.
Scuttlebutt is a production of the Marine Corps Association. You have heard the voices or contributions from Major Vic Rubel, USMC retired, Nancy Lichman, William Truding, and our guest. Ty Frazier is the editor, sound engineer, and technical producer. The Marine Corps Association is not an agency of the U.S. government. The opinions expressed in this episode are the personal views of the participants and do not reflect the official position of the United States Marine Corps, the Department of Defense, or the Marine Corps Association.